They thought silence was their shield. They thought power was their armor. But one invisible woman gathered 17 voices and collapsed a corporate empire from the inside. The coffee mug exploded against the break room floor, ceramic shards skidding across the tiles as hot liquid splashed like a warning flare. Landry had Piper trapped. His arm was planted beside her head, his body crowding her space like a predator testing boundaries he knew no one would challenge. Piper's fingers trembled around her folder, knuckles pale, breath shallow. Her eyes searched the room, faces, walls, exits, until they landed on me, a silent plea. "Need something?" Landry snapped, without turning around, irritation cutting through his smooth corporate tone. I stepped forward, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to force him back. "Actually, yes," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "I need you to stop cornering women in this office." The room froze. Even the hum of the vending machine felt louder. Piper didn't hesitate. She slipped past him, clutching her folder to her chest like a shield, whispering, "Excuse me," as she fled. Landry turned slowly, his trademark smirk sliding onto his face. The smirk that said rules didn't apply to him. "Who exactly do you think you're talking to?" he asked. "I know exactly who I'm talking to. The question is, do you know who you're talking to?" He scanned the room to make sure no one else was watching. "Look, Sybil, I don't know what your problem is." "Barcelona," I said softly. The color drained from his face as if someone had pulled a plug. "I know about Barcelona," I continued, leaning closer. "Mina on the balcony, Jeanette in the elevator, Krista in the hallway." His throat tightened. "You're bluffing." "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, I said. "I've requested to speak. Want to walk there together?" For a moment, he just stared. Then he turned and bolted. "Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone get away with terrible behavior simply because they had connections, because they knew the right people, had the right last name, sat in the right office? It happens every day. If this story hits home, hit like, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Stories like this only change things when people hear them. Now, let me tell you who I really am. My name is Sybil Morrow. I'm the kind of person people forget 5 minutes after meeting. Average height, brown hair tied into a practical ponytail, a face that blends into conference rooms, elevators, and hallways. In corporate environments, invisibility is often a curse, but sometimes invisibility is a weapon. I worked as a compliance analyst, a title that makes executives bored and coworkers yawn. My job was to study processes, trace inconsistencies, map patterns, and notice what others overlooked. 8 months earlier, I joined the company. During my first week, I saw Landry isolate Daphne in the copy room. The way he leaned in too close, the way she leaned away while forcing a smile. I knew that posture. "Don't," Whitney whispered when she caught me watching. We were eating lunch outside. "He's the VP's nephew, untouchable. If you value your career, stay quiet." She wasn't the only one. That's just how things are. Nothing can be done. Keep your head down. They didn't know I'd already tried that once. 3 years earlier, at another company, I'd reported a senior executive for harassment. I trusted policies. I trusted HR. I trusted the system. The system promoted him. The system pushed me out. That betrayal changed me forever. So this time, I didn't report. I observed. Landry wasn't reckless. He was calculated. He targeted new hires who had no allies yet, contractors who feared losing their contracts, single mothers who couldn't afford unemployment, women who needed the job more than the job needed them. He timed everything, private enough to avoid witnesses, public enough to look accidental, a hand that lingered, a whisper in the hallway, a compliment that felt like a threat. And then there was Harmon. Harmon Mitchell, Vice President of Operations, Landry's uncle. Harmon built a fortress around him: loyal managers, friendly HR partners, strategic promotions. Complaints vanished. Transfer requests mysteriously stalled. Women who resisted were labeled difficult, not aligned with culture, or not leadership material. So I made myself invisible on purpose. I stayed late. I lingered in hallways. I listened. I befriended administrative assistants, maintenance workers, security guards, the people who saw everything but were never heard. Barcelona changed everything. The company retreat in Barcelona happened 4 months earlier. 3 women had incidents with Landry on that trip. What he didn't know was that I spoke fluent Spanish. I'd lived in Madrid for 5 years as a teenager. I befriended hotel staff who had witnessed late-night incidents. They told me about security calls, complaints, and awkward encounters involving the American executive. I tracked down former employees who had quietly resigned because of him. Coffee meetings, long phone calls, stories whispered like confessions. I wasn't building a legal case. I was building a pattern. Then Piper arrived. 22 years old, first corporate job, supporting younger siblings while her mother fought cancer. I saw Landry notice her instantly, the way his eyes followed her, the way he lingered after her introduction meeting to offer a personal tour. I warned her subtly, but Piper's vulnerability made her a perfect target. When I saw her trapped in the break room, something inside me snapped. After Landry fled, she whispered, "Thank you. Nobody ever helps. They just look away." "Not anymore," I told her. That was the moment I stopped watching. That was the moment I decided to burn the silence down. I returned to my desk, heart pounding. A notification flashed across the company network. Emergency board meeting, 2 p.m. I hadn't actually requested to speak. That part was a bluff, but Landry believed it. My phone buzzed. "Whitney, what did you do?" "Whitney, Harmon is furious." Then, "Landry, you threatened him." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent the message I'd prepared for months. A group text to 17 women. "It's happening today, 2 p.m. Boardroom." Replies flooded. "I'm coming. Finally. I've waited years for this." At 1:30 p.m., my office phone rang.
At 1:30 p.m., my office phone rang. "Miss Morrow," the board assistant said, her voice clipped and formal, "your presence is requested in the board meeting." "I'll be there," I replied, as if this was just another calendar appointment and not the moment that could end my career. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened monitor. This was it. For months, I'd been the ghost in the corridors, the silent observer, the invisible analyst. Now I was walking into the most powerful room in the company and daring it to listen. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. Not fear, something sharper, anticipation, rage, determination. I reviewed my notes, not because I needed them, but because I needed to remember why I started this. Names, dates, patterns, quiet conversations, shared tears. 17 voices. 1 pattern. I shut down my computer, straightened my blazer, and stepped into the hallway. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. Each floor ticked by like a countdown. Ding! The doors opened. The boardroom sat at the edge of the building, a glass-walled cathedral of power overlooking the city. The skyline glittered outside like it didn't care what was about to happen inside. 12 people sat around the massive, polished table. Executives, board members, lawyers, people who signed paychecks and controlled careers with a single vote. Harmon Mitchell sat at the head. He had the same jawline as Landry, the same cold eyes. A man who had built a reputation for discipline, structure, and absolute control. He looked annoyed. I took the only empty chair. "Miss Morrow," Harmon said, his voice smooth and rehearsed, "my nephew claims you've created a hostile work environment, that you've been spreading malicious rumors and making threats." The words felt rehearsed, polished, legal. I'd expected this. He continued, Such behavior violates multiple company policies and could be grounds for immediate termination. The word termination hung in the air like a guillotine. My heart dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. I anticipated this, I said calmly. Before you continue, you should know I'm not alone in this. Confusion flickered across his face for a fraction of a second. What exactly do you mean? He asked. The boardroom door opened. Deborah Kane walked in first, Chief Financial Officer, the only woman in senior leadership. Calm, brilliant, and feared in quiet ways. She didn't look at Harmon, she looked at me. Behind her came Whitney, then Piper, then Jeanette, then Mina, then Krista. 5 current employees walked in and lined up against the wall, their faces pale but determined. The board members shifted in their seats. Then the door opened again. 7 former employees entered. Some I hadn't seen in months, some in years. They had coordinated their schedules, driven for hours, taken unpaid leave, risked everything to be here. Then 2 women I recognized from client meetings stepped inside. Clients. The room changed. Executives who had been relaxed minutes earlier sat straighter. Lawyers exchanged looks. Harmon's jaw tightened. "What is the meaning of this?" Harmon demanded, half rising from his chair. I stood. "You wanted to discuss a hostile work environment. We all have stories, and we're prepared to tell them here today, or publicly if necessary." The temperature of the room dropped. Deborah stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "Perhaps we should listen," she said calmly, her voice carrying authority that even Harmon couldn't dismiss. "This is highly irregular," the general counsel, Thurston, protested, adjusting his tie. "We can't just have random employees storming a board meeting making accusations without—" "Without what?" Deborah interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "Without evidence? Without documentation? Without a room full of witnesses and potential legal liability that could destroy this company's reputation overnight?" Silence. One of the older board members, Bennett, leaned forward, his weathered face serious. "I move that we hear what these women have to say. If there is truth here, we address it now." Harmon looked around the table, realizing the control he usually commanded was slipping. "Fine," he said tightly. "Let's proceed." Mina stepped forward first. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "In Barcelona, Landry cornered me on the hotel balcony. He told me my promotion was being discussed and that he had influence with his uncle. Then he put his hand on my lower back and suggested I join him in his room so he could show me the view." Her words landed like a slap. Jeanette spoke next. "In the elevator, he pressed against me when we were alone. When I objected, he laughed and told me I should learn to take a compliment." The next 3 days passed in a blur. Landry's office sat dark and empty. His name disappeared from meeting invites. His badge access was revoked. People whispered in hallways, glancing over their shoulders like the walls might be listening. Harmon stayed in his office with the door closed. The company felt like a building waiting for an earthquake. I was praised quietly and feared loudly. Some people avoided me. Others stopped me in hallways just to whisper, "Thank you." But I couldn't relax, because men like Landry don't just disappear quietly. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Parking garage, level 3, now." My stomach tightened. I showed the message to Whitney. "Don't go alone," she said immediately. "This feels wrong." "I won't," I replied. I texted Deborah and security. Then I headed down. The parking garage smelled of concrete and oil, dim lights flickering like something out of a crime documentary. My footsteps echoed as I stepped off the elevator onto level 3. Deborah walked beside me. A security officer stayed slightly behind. Landry stood beside his luxury car. He looked nothing like the polished executive who had ruled conference rooms. His hair was messy, his tie loosened, his eyes bloodshot, his posture unsteady. "You've ruined everything," he said as soon as he saw me. His voice sounded hollow, like something inside him had already broken. "Happy now?" "I told the truth," I replied. He laughed bitterly. "Truth? You think you know the truth about me? About this company?" He took a step forward. The security officer stepped forward too. Landry stopped, swaying slightly. "My uncle can't protect me anymore," he muttered. "You destroyed him too." "You destroyed yourselves," Deborah said coldly. "The investigation begins tomorrow. I suggest you cooperate fully. Your access has been revoked. Leave the premises." Landry stared at me. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," I replied. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. The next morning, the company exploded. People gathered around monitors, phones, laptops. Piper ran toward me, breathless. "Have you seen the news?" Headlines flashed across screens. Tech executive dismissed following multiple harassment allegations. Landry's face stared back at us from every news site. Then another headline appeared. VP of Operations resigns amid harassment scandal involving nephew. Harmon had resigned, effective immediately. The office fell silent. Harmon Mitchell didn't resign from anything, ever. He was known for surviving scandals, restructuring departments, outlasting CEOs. This felt wrong. Too easy. Too fast. Whitney whispered, "He wouldn't just step down. Something doesn't add up." She was right. Later that day, Deborah called me into her office. She closed the door behind me. "There's something you should see," she said, sliding a tablet across her desk. An internal email, sent by Harmon minutes before his resignation. Formal language, polished tone. But one line froze me. "In light of information Miss Morrow apparently possesses regarding Barcelona, I believe my continued leadership would further damage the company." My heart stopped. "I never mentioned Harmon," I said quietly. Deborah studied me. "Interesting," she said. "Yet Harmon clearly believes you know something about Barcelona, something serious enough to resign over." A chill ran down my spine. What happened in Barcelona that Harmon was afraid of? What did he think I knew? That evening, my phone buzzed again, a secured messaging app. The sender was the hotel staff member I'd befriended in Barcelona. "You should see this. Deleted from security archives yesterday. I made a copy." A video file was attached. My hands trembled as I found an empty conference room and closed the door. I pressed play. The footage showed a hotel corridor at 2:14 a.m. The timestamp matched the company retreat. Landry appeared first, supporting a woman who could barely stand. She was clearly intoxicated. I recognized her instantly. The wife of a major client. Moments later, Harmon appeared from another hallway. They argued. No audio, but the body language was aggressive. Then Harmon grabbed the woman's other arm. Together, uncle and nephew half carried, half dragged her toward the elevator. The doors closed. The video ended. My stomach turned. This wasn't just harassment. This wasn't just abuse of power. This was something darker, potentially criminal, potentially career-ending for multiple people, potentially company-destroying. My phone buzzed again. Whitney. "Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Something big is happening." I stared at the dark screen. The next morning, the board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. No agenda, no explanation, just urgency. The hallways felt different, quieter, heavier, like everyone knew something was about to explode. When I walked into the boardroom, every seat was filled. Board members, legal counsel, external advisors. Deborah sat near the head of the table, her expression unreadable. Two men in dark suits sat beside her, third-party investigators, already briefed on the harassment allegations. Harmon's chair was empty. For the first time in years, the man who controlled everything wasn't in the room. Bennett cleared his throat. Thank you all for assembling on short notice. As you're aware, recent events have triggered a broader investigation into conduct during the Barcelona retreat. The word Barcelona hung in the air like smoke. Thurston, the general counsel, looked like he hadn't slept. We received a communication overnight, he said, tapping his tablet, from a third-party source. Security footage, potentially incriminating. My pulse spiked. They had it. Deborah glanced at me, just for a second. She knew. The footage played on the massive screen. The same hallway, the same timestamp. Landry supporting the intoxicated woman, Harmon appearing, the two of them dragging her toward the elevator. Gasps filled the room. One board member whispered, "That's the Langford account's spouse." The Langfords were one of the company's largest clients, a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This crosses beyond corporate policy violations, Thurston said quietly. This is potential criminal liability. Deborah folded her hands. And potential catastrophic reputational damage. Bennett leaned forward. Where did this footage come from? All we know is it was preserved before being deleted from the hotel's archives, Thurston said. Someone inside the company had requested its removal last week. Every eye shifted to Harmon's empty chair. This raises serious questions, Deborah said. Questions about what else was suppressed, about who knew, and about how far this protection network extended. Another board member spoke, his voice tense. If this becomes public, we're not just looking at lawsuits, we're looking at criminal investigations, regulators, congressional inquiries. The room felt suddenly smaller. Bennett turned to me. Miss Marrow, you triggered this chain of events. Did you have any knowledge of this incident before today? I met his gaze. I suspected patterns. I didn't have this footage until last night. Yet Harmon believed you knew, Thurston added. I never mentioned Harmon, only Landry. Deborah nodded slowly, which means Harmon believed something about Barcelona was already exposed, or about to be. The implications settled over the room like fog. What else happened in Barcelona, and how many people were involved? The investigators spoke next. We've interviewed multiple witnesses, one of them said. Hotel staff, former employees, and current staff. There is evidence of coordinated suppression of complaints, destruction of records, and retaliation against whistleblowers. The word retaliation echoed. Everyone knew who that had been aimed at before. Me. Bennett's voice hardened. This board has a fiduciary duty. If there is evidence of systemic misconduct and cover-up, we must act decisively. Deborah leaned forward. Agreed. I propose we expand the investigation beyond Landry and Harmon to include any executives who participated in suppression or misconduct. Silence. Then, quiet nods. Even Thurston didn't object. A legal advisor spoke next. We should assume this footage will leak. We should prepare for public disclosure. If the Langford family speaks, this becomes international news. Deborah turned to me again. You've been in contact with the hotel staff who preserved this footage. Yes. Do you trust them? Yes. Then assume others have copies too. My chest tightened. The truth was spreading faster than anyone could control. Bennett exhaled slowly. This company has been built on the illusion of integrity. That illusion is gone. Now we decide whether to rebuild or collapse. He looked around the table. I move that we place multiple executives on administrative leave pending investigation. I further move that we cooperate fully with any law enforcement inquiries. Deborah immediately seconded. The vote was unanimous. The purge had begun. After the meeting, Deborah pulled me aside. You understand what you started, she said quietly as we walked down the hallway. Yes.
This goes beyond harassment. If Barcelona becomes criminal, this company could be dismantled. I know. She studied me for a moment. Are you ready for that? I thought about Piper. She had started therapy funded by the company's new survivor support program. Mina was reinstated with promotion and back pay. Jeanette transferred to a new team with leadership support. Krista joined the policy committee with Deborah. Former employees received settlements and public apologies. The women who had once whispered were now shaping the company's future. But the story wasn't over. Landry's trial began 6 months later. Harmon was subpoenaed. The Barcelona footage was played in court. Hotel staff testified, employees testified, clients testified. The pattern was undeniable. Landry was found liable in civil court and reached a confidential criminal plea deal. Harmon's legacy collapsed under public scrutiny. Their names became case studies in corporate ethics. 1 year later, I stood in the same boardroom. The city skylines still glittered outside the windows, but the people at the table were different, more diverse, more cautious, more human. Deborah nodded at me. Miss Marrow, would you like to present the annual ethics report? I walked to the front. The same room where I had once been threatened with termination, the same room where 17 women had stood against power. This year, I said, we received 312 ethics reports. Every single one was investigated, no retaliation occurred, and 5 systemic issues were corrected before they caused harm. The board listened, not because they feared lawsuits, but because they feared silence. After the meeting, Piper stopped me in the hallway. "You changed everything," she said. "No," I replied. "We did." She smiled. "So what's next?" I looked out the window. "Next," I said, "we make sure this never happens again." That night, I walked past the break room. The coffee machine hummed quietly. No shattered mugs, no trapped interns, no whispered warnings. Just people working in a place that finally felt safer. I realized something. I started this story as an invisible compliance analyst collecting patterns. I ended it as a reminder that patterns are power, and silence is the most dangerous system of all. If you ever feel small, invisible, or powerless, remember this. It only takes one person to start a ripple, and sometimes that ripple becomes a wave that changes everything.